like during that period of time. And you were telling Val how you lived on the Ashton McComb place. So I was wondering if you could describe the McComb place for me.
Well, to describe the place, it's to fully describe it, it'd be a little difficult because I can remember in my mind just how the houses and how the people was, because lots of the people I have forgotten their names. But you take, people was living about over the place just like people in town, only, we was just country folks living in the country. Now, that was my first year on the Macomb place when that drought caught me. In the situation, during March, my granddaddy passed. And he was the one, that was the big chief on keeping the bread wagon rolling. Well, at that particular time, my grandmother and I had three brothers, they was smaller kids. In other words, I was 11 years older than the oldest one, and they was the twin girls, which was next to me. And I was 11 years older than them, and they was just becoming, I reckon, about, anywhere I'm 10 to 11 years old. Just definitely I may miss it for 1 year some way, up or down, but the boys was all just little fellas, little boys, But at that time, I had the size of a man, and I had to be a man. But I didn't know nothing about no managing, just falling in the line of going to work and taking over just the man's load. So that left me, I had to manage, I had to work, and I got a lot of instructions, from the older men around there on the Macomb farm, had given me advice, and I was one of those persons, I would always listen and take in what a older person would tell me. I wasn't a fella, to know it all. So they would advise me, how to plant, how to raise gardens, and how to take care of young pigs, and just everything, So when this depression come, it cut the money off. Now, in 1930, it did very well, long as I was getting the cash furnish. But after...
Excuse me a second. Can you tell me? You tell me how when the Depression came on. Can you repeat that for me?
Well, when the pressure come on, you see, we had planned for one thing, and the crops were short from the drought, and we couldn't pay back the monies that we had borrowed for the crop, making it. So that left the landlord, tenants, and everything in a cramp. Well, the old debts, you couldn't pay them. You needed to work, and there wasn't nowhere to work, Nothing but just one thing on McComb's place, they had a lot of cordwood cut. They fired the gin, steam gin, had a cotton gin over there. And this gin burnt wood. I don't just exactly know now how many cords of wood was cut, but it was divided among, all of the tenants on the place cut the wood. And they give $1.50 a cord, and that was good money at that time because there wasn't no other work to do. And during the fall months, is one thing that helped us out. It was a little old stave mill. Now, Thebes was McComb place, and Snyder was where the sawmill was. It wasn't a sawmill, it was a stave mill, where they made staves, and McCombs had a lot of land, and they had a lot of oak timber. And we'd get out and we'd make stave boats and take.
I wanted you to pick up at the Ashton McComb place. You were
Mhm.
saying he had 2 or 3 acres. You were describing that for me. 2, 3 miles
Territory.
territory.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, sir.
Whenever you're ready, Mr. Harris.
All right, now to pick up where I left off, I go for the stave mill, and
Okay.
then we'll
That's
switch
fine.
again.
Okay.
Now, the stave mill
Let's try that again.
was where that we
There was a car, and I need you to say the stave mill section, that line you were just about to say.
the stave mill. We all went to work and was cutting wood from the comb place for the stave mill until it give out. It went on. It lasted until all through the winter, and then the next following spring, well, they pulled out on the left. So then we had to make it on our own. Then for whatever we could be done already raised. That's when the Red Cross come in and giving us seeds, and the home demonstrating agents was giving advice on how to plant, when to plant, and how to fertilize it, and what kind to use. Now, McCombs, he had a warehouse right side the railroad, and he'd get the fertilizers and seeds and different things and corn to feed the mules and all like that when he was buying it in to furnish the place. It'll be unloaded, say, off of the train car right into the warehouse, and of course he had his own lock and key on that, see, and it was furnished to us from that. Whenever we'd come in, it would always be a bill of what we got on the, well, I was on the renting side, and I was on the buying a team, called myself, but I never did pay for that team. And after worked there, made it all the way through, we fooled around there. We didn't make about 2 or 3 bales of cotton. They owed about $600. And the cotton slump was making crop on for 20 cents a pound, and it come on and fell down to about 7 and 8 cents. So it just left everybody in a distressing time, and that's when the Red Cross come in and come as helping. And during that time, the Red Cross, we went to Hamburg a lot of times and picked it up, but the boss always told us, when to go and what they was going to be giving away, and he'd put in the orders of so many families on his place. And that was the way we got our Red Cross, most of it, through those times in this section where I was living at. But now, it was a pretty big plantation now. It was something like, I imagine about, if all the land run in kind of long strips, but it would be enough land in there was Macomb to, I'd say, cover about 3 square miles, which is run about 640 maybe acres to a mile. And I don't know, outlying land, he had some where he raised hay off up there at a place called Mist. We'd go up there and haul hay from a barn when we'd need hay for the Macomb place down there. But what got us in a real tight spot was we worked there about 2 or 3 years, and everybody just got disheartened and come as moving off, getting rid of the debt and one thing and another. Of course, that wasn't the right thing to do, but that's what everybody went to done.
I want to ask you, I want to go back to what the land looked like at Mr. McComb's place that first year of the drought. What happened to his land?
Well, this land was, what happened, it come a rain in the spring of the year and got the water up. It was in there where I was living at, it was a break, and this break flooded and taken, about half of the cotton went under. Then that what was left out on that break side, it got real grassy, and the grass stunted it, the crop, By the time it could get it worked out, well, then the drought hit it. And when the drought hit it, well, it just never could survive. It just had all that acreage in there and little old bumblebee cotton, and I think come up with about 4 bales of cotton. And that wasn't no cotton for the debt that was on it, see? And it just went like that. Well, the next year, following year, for something to eat and one thing and another, we had plenty of that because we had done survived. We done come in then and made plenty sweet potatoes, peas, and you name it. Gardens was good, but no money. And right in following it, see, your price was so low on the cotton crop, which was the money crop to pay it back, until, I don't know, I think the cotton got down there low enough where it took me about 3 bales to make $100, and that was hard. If you wasn't a big farmer and had a whole lot of land going for you, you just out of luck.
I want to cut for a second. I said was, you were head of the household, right? You were 20 years old. How did you decide to get Red Cross aid?
Well, it wasn't decided. It was just what you might say a public thing. Everybody was needing aid, and when it come in, see, I happened to be one of the families that was eligible for getting the Red Cross aid. And as I said, the landlord made the decisions on when for his labor to go and pick up Red Cross aid. Now, I can't just think right definite how much I was getting, but it was 7 in the family, including myself, see. And that's what we'd get the aid when it come down on the groceries and parts like that, for 7, a family of 7. Well, it'll be probably other families would be a family of 17. Well, they got more Red Cross aid than what the one that didn't have but 3 in family. And it went like that. But anything we got back in those days, was good. And of course, where we survived at on our table is because we had free fishing, free hunting, and it wasn't no limit on what you could, just whatever you could catch, whatever you could get. Now, I can remember, and President Hoover was the president, people killed rabbits, and they made sausages out of the rabbits, and they called it Hoover sausages. And of course, back in them days, it was a lot of jokes. When I can't think of all of them, but they were just telling, about how Hoover turned the thing around, but it couldn't blame him all the way because he was definitely responsible for all the happening, what is happening in the land, where it's like when the drought was on. He wasn't responsible for the drought. But now I think he did give a recipe on how to make those sausages, and that was just good as people would want, making Hoover sausages out of rabbits. And of course, it was a lot of people And some done better than others, some didn't, because some had more surrounding, like goats and hogs, more chickens, and just you name it, you see, they had cattle, and they done fairly good, but then still, in making the crop, it wasn't very much money coming because you hadn't made enough products to get the money out of paying your debts and, going along like that. But it seems that one thing kind of pulled the country out is after they changed presidents.
Okay. So I want to know about this Red Cross aid. I want to know what kind of products you got, and you can tell me about the foodstuffs, and also tell me about the seeds.
Ready?
Mm-hmm.
All right, now.
Okay.
When they eat?
Hold on 1 second. Let me. Speak.
And I want you to tell me about the foodstuffs and also the seed program.
Now, the seed program, when they give out the seeds,
Who's that? Can you tell me? Start all over and say the Red Cross gave out seeds.
the Red Cross gave out seeds, and when we went for them, we got peas and kale. We got turnip seed, collard seed, cabbage seeds, just a full line, cucumbers, just everything you could put in a garden or that bloomed in a garden. Even got eggplants. I didn't know anything about eggplants until the Red Cross issued those eggplant seeds. And they gave some corn. We had some Red Cross sweet corn, planted in the garden. And when we was getting finished, we got flour. We got 1 pound packages of lard. I don't just remember now how many I got, but it's put up in 1 pound package. That's the first time I'd seen a 1 pound package. Little old cartons of lard like butter sizes I'm seeing. And they issued it was something like pinto beans, but it was split beans, they call it. That was the beans, I reckon, had been sorted out from among the good beans, and just all of them was in halves. We got lima beans, which is the butter bean, and they was on the split side. But now butter beans was something I didn't hardly like dry, but I loved them all right, when they was green. But at that time, you see, to fill in the gap on the food table, well, there wasn't no kick on it. But now, during that time of this Red Cross aid, they had the sacks of flour with a red X on it. Now, we had been getting 24-pound sacks of flour when we was buying flour, but it come with a 25 on it. And it had a red X on that Red Cross and marked on it, not to be sold. So they kind of had everything, to where that the merchants couldn't take the flour, because they had it in their possession and go sell it. Of course, now this is just a hearsay that some of them taking it, and put in barrels. But now that's not me knowing that. That's just, what you might say public random. They talked about those ones that would get those carloads of flour, and it'd give out quick. Now, as it was any wrongdoing, I'm not familiar with that, but it's just, I just happen to think of one of the jokes, that come out. They probably was joking, and it could have been true. I don't know, but you see, that was a thing of proof. If that person had a known that they was taking the flour, resagging it, or either putting it in barrels. But it was all lots of things, went on back there and was talked among people, but it didn't ever get nowhere. It'd just be, a conversation among a bunch sitting around, talking. And after they changed presidents,
Cut. And what I want you to tell me is what you did on a typical day when you went to get Red Cross aid. How you left the McComb place, what town you went into, who you had to see, and that whole process.
well, now when we left the McComb place, 3 or 4 of us, the head of the house, would go in a wagon. And we'd go to Hamburg. And while we go, you see, each one would be processed over there according to your family size and what they was give you. Now, we went plenty times, maybe we wasn't getting over 1 or 2 different items. I can remember one time we went and just picked up sweet potatoes, bushel of sweet potatoes. Now, a large family would get maybe 2 bushels, but a medium family wouldn't get but 1 bushel. And the funny part about it, it was a widow lady went with us on the wagon one time. We got over there, and her bushel of potatoes was rotten. But how she caught it when we got them out there and got them to the wagon. It brought them back in. And the ones that was letting them out, they kind of hesitated a little bit, but they give her another, just set that bushel back and give her another. Well, one thing I noticed, I found out, they were strict. They had to account for every bushel, and that rotten bushel, they had to keep it, see. Because one fella asked, could he have it to go give his hogs? They told him no, they had to keep that. That's got to be turned back in. Well, whatever the Red Cross, the source of buying this stuff to let it out for aid, well, you see, whoever sold them had to make that good. And that next time following that is when we got some rice. But mind you, back in those days, you see, it come in 100-pound sacks, and it was issued out just like you was getting across the counter in the store. So, if you was getting 10 pound of rice, they weighed it out, see, or 15 pound or whatever it was, it'd be weighed out of them big sacks. But now the flour would come in 25-pound sacks. And I don't know, I just can't think of everything they issued in that round, but now we got.
Cut.
Yeah.
If you could start out in March 1930.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever you're ready.
Ready to start?
I'm ready whenever you are.
All right. For March, the planting of the crop, getting it in. Repeat. The beginning was a wet time. We had a big break in front of the land, a place where I was living, and that break overflowed and come out, taking the road in the part of the field. After the water went back, the cotton was already up. Well, it was cultivating time for here, and it was had done got grassy. Of course, now the young cotton was still younger. It had to be planted after the water went back. Now, one thing happened during this drought, after this drought, going on into the fall. We had what you call a mild winter. I think we had just a little freeze, hard frost, just a glaze, just a little ice glaze. And everything pretty well survived through the winter that was green, like green vegetation. And it was so warm, we had, in that day, we had cattle and livestock. We had to put a mixture of light creosote dip in water and keep the the mules we was plying, we'd have to mop them to keep them buffalo gnats. The gnats is called a buffalo gnat, a big gnat. And they would just get on anything, just cover it up, and then just suck the blood until they have to fall off. We use black oil like what you drain out of motors. That was the following that winter. You see, wasn't no hard winter, and it didn't kill no insect or nothing.
Frost. It was a light frost. But I was wondering if you could tell me, at the same time you sort of describing what the weather was, if you could tell me and explain to me what made that winter so difficult. Because we understand that was a really hard winter for people to get something to eat.
Well, it wasn't too much of a hard winter for, as I can recollect, on getting something to eat. But the trick was, you see, you might say it was hard too, because they didn't have the money to go to the stores and buy, like they'd been in a habit of doing. But now, that's when the time where it come in, that the fishing, the hunting, and we had a mild winter for us being cold. It wasn't a cold, real cold winter. There's one thing I left out. We had,
Wait a minute.
did he say, wait a minute?
Yeah.
Yeah, that truck was too noisy. Go ahead, start again, please.
One thing, we made a lot of homemade clothes too back there.
You ought to do that again.
Okay.
Sounds good.
So you want to tell me about homemade clothes?
We used the pick sacks.
Can you say we made a lot of homemade clothes again?
We made a whole lot of homemade clothes, such as jumper. We wore overalls and jumper. And it was a white pants that was popular that you bought, white duck. Well, at lower, as we called it, what you made pick sacks out of, we made pants out of that lowers, and we made jumpers. And I was seamster long in them times. And I could make the jumper, and I could make the pants. And I could make them just perfect like what you bought. I never will forget it. It was a barber. They called him Cripple Rabbit because he had one leg had been affected some way or another, and that made him limp when he walked. They called him Cripple Rabbit. I passed along streets in Portland there it was a wicked day, wearing my lowers pants, and he looked at them, and he said, if it wasn't for that, they had a little blue streak out near the edge, and in putting them together, that streak was showed, in the cloth itself. just a blue strand of what you would call it when you're waving anything, to make a mark.
A second.
Speed.
July was pretty hot.
July was pretty hot, and if you had young corn, it was hot enough for the growth of it up in the top to fire up sunburn. And if at that time we didn't have water to water the roots, and that was one thing that made the corn kind of short. But naturally, the drought had affected it at any rates. But it was so hot in July until that tender top of the corn, where it's growing up, where the toss will come out, well, it would turn white. Just like if you ever been around watermelons, young watermelons, if you don't cover them with grass or lay something over them to shade them, they will blister and turn white, and that affects that young watermelon. But if you just cover with grass, to where it can just grow and not sunburn, and cabbage the same way. If a cabbage burns, it rots. That's for sun heat, and that's what happened in July.
So in the fall?
In the fall on over, we had
Sir, could you just start that again? In the fall?
In the fall now, it was a mild fall. The cold, the frost, it didn't come in November like it usually comes. And it was way over in December sometime before we got that little freeze, to knock things off. But such as cotton stalks on land that where, if it wasn't sand land like buckshot land, they just stayed green right on through the winter. And it was green enough, looked like to made another crop. They didn't die, but they cut them down, to plant. Now, it's one thing that I didn't experience. I heard my granddaddy say that he had seen cotton live through the winter like that, and he'd go there and, just cut off kind of high and make another crop on the same stalks. But I didn't see nobody try it. But it was green stalks.
How did you make it through the winter? I understand there wasn't any money. Your landlord didn't have any money to furnish you that winter.
All right, during the winter time, that's when this Red Cross come in, and we'd go these different places to pick up on food or clothing. But the clothing was always, it would be a shortage when it come down to me getting them and a lot of the people on Macomb Place. And so that's why this here making these homemade clothes come in. And it was, it was just a kind of slick way of doing it. We would wear the sack out on the bottom, picking cotton, and then take your top part of it and make us a jumper. And it was kind of popular back in them days. Well, it's one of those things when it said need more come along, where you didn't have it, you got it. And the way we got it was a good way if you could have the talent or skill to do that. But now, in the falling, from 30 to 31, that's when the spring come, and you was having trouble then with the hogs dying off from them buffalo gnats. They come early, and they just stayed. Well, I don't reckon people was up on it, with some chemicals and one thing or another. Now, just like if you had ticks and fleas and things like that on cattle, you could take them by the dipping vat you seen when he's dipped. Well, you knock all that off of them. But these gnats was flying insect. And you take these last years, now, since this chemist and one thing or another is going, you don't see any.
Did you know anyone who got sick? Did any of your brothers and sisters get disease? Allegra?
No, not during them times. Now, one thing, they give malaria shots. They started that off in 27 behind the high water. And so, once in the spring, long in the time of May and June, well, it'd have a certain time for everybody to meet at a certain place, or maybe go into the pharmacy or drugstore, we call them in that day, and it would be a government nurse or something there giving malaria shots. And that would take care of just like the time we have with mosquitoes. They claim that is spreading a lot of malaria. And being bitten by different insects, summertime, you know. Well, that saved us on that.
Cut.
Beat.
So, tell me about waiting in line in Hamburg.
Now, waiting in line wasn't too much because they turned them off very fast. It wasn't, you didn't have, it wasn't a whole line of questions. It was mostly to get the aid, just like I folks said, your boss man, he would already go in front and he'd be done told how many families he had on his place that needed aid. And so when you got out there, they would check each individual that was drawing for a household to find out how many was in the family, how many you drawing, and what your name and your address, and like that. So it made it turn off pretty fast in the first aid years, you know, but then after you know, got on up the road and changed presidents and one thing or another, it took a little more time, you know, about different aids, and then there were lots of rules that they did change, you know.
But during the days of Hoover, what did you do?
Well, this is done at the Hoover time, you know. The landlord, you see, this was a disaster Avery, I say. We had a short crop from drought, and then short price. What you had, you didn't make nothing hardly, and what you did make wasn't no sale. You know what I mean? It wasn't what you was expecting when you started that crop, and that made a big difference.
Okay, we have to cut. This was like a catastrophe. Could you start out? We were in Hoover days.
Well, what part you want me to start off
We would just
on?
start out with the disaster part.
Well, one thing I don't think I've mentioned, and that was picking of the cotton.
Okay.
You see, where we had been having seed money. See, when you pick the bale of cotton, you'd have a little seed money, even if you was sharecropping, that you could buy things, you know, for the house out of the cotton seed. Well, during at that time, everything had done got so low until I heard the neighbors talking up there at Snyder, that is above Thieves. The Jenna up there, the bale of cotton, I just remember now what was paying for the bale of cotton, bag and the tires and the gin and everything. But here was a fella had to go home and get a chicken to finish paying his Jenna fees. I think it was about 25 cents he owed. Well, it wasn't weighing seed at that time. It just the amount of lint that was in the bale, and they allowed so much for each pound of lint to pay for the Jenny. And if you had a light bale, see, you wouldn't have enough to pay for the bagging and the ties what was put on the bale of cotton. Because I think the Jenny was a kind of solid price, something like $1.50. But now the bagging and ties coming in on there, that added a little more money to that $1.50, maybe $2 or $3 or $4, whatever.
Let's cut for a second. Let's get into. Can you start out telling me what Mr. McComb did, and can you use his name?
And then don't forget to keep looking at
Look
Mary.
at me when
Yeah.
you talk.
Mm-hmm. Now, one thing about this situation, in furnishing, you're supposed to make cotton to play back the money. But now, as I first stated about this seed money, it had got to where it wasn't no seed money. And in places selling the cotton had to go in the Mid-South loan, as they call it, the Mid-South. Association loan or some kind of loan. Well, it was put in Mr. Ashton's name and your name if you was a cropper, you see. But what it was, they paid a cent, just a penny, on the pound. If your bale of cotton weighed $4.50, you got $4 loan on the cotton and 50 cents. If it weighed 500, you got $5. But now,
Can you tell me that story again and explain the relationship and how much you got paid? But can you tell me, is it you paying per 100 pound? Can you add that so that I understand the money calculation?
now the calculation on this giving, that's where this coming in. You see, while you picking your cotton, you got to have something to eat. See. Now, you ain't, usually whenever you started picking cotton, you'd be getting seed money. And the seeds, cotton seed, would feed you while you was picking your cotton. Naturally, the cotton went against your debt. But now the price of the cotton had done slumped so low until in place of Macomb selling it, it was going into a loan. See? And the loan was loaning 1 cent on the pound of lint cotton, not on the pound that you put in it. We was putting 1,600 in a bale of cotton at them days. Rowden 40, Cleveland Big Bowl, whatever. It come in them later years, Delta Pine. About 1250 would make a 500 weight bale. Well, then the seeds then, it was after that started, was always, they got scales at all the gins then, and you just barely paid ginning out of your seed. But during that time now, it had done got down to where that the seed wasn't paying the ginning and they're just swapping it out. They just take all the seeds, see, to pay for the ginning. Now, where Macomb had one advantage, he had his own gin. But you see, if it went to another gin of people that had farms and didn't have no gin or wasn't in no gin interest, well, you see, the seed just went for the ginning. And then, if you had anything to say, they could figure you out where you owed ginning. But if you just settle for... But now, where it was in this old big roll cotton, you'd always have 1,000 pounds when you put 1,600 pounds of cotton in a bale. But now when it got on down to where this Delta Pine come out and you DP&L we call it, and you was using that kind of cotton, and that's what everything fell for in those days.
Let's cut for a second here. Mr. Harris, can you explain the cotton situation to me just the way you explained it to Eric right now?
Well, about this cotton situation, now, where we was going deeper and deeper in debt was on the price slump. And after it slumped, well, you just couldn't hardly sell it at that price. And then it turned to where it was all being put in the loan. And all we could get to even gather the crop would be that little penny on the pound for, that the loan company give to gather it.
And what did that mean about your debt situation?
The debt situation, it was put in there on price going up. It was even leveled off at 8 cents. But when it was sold or when it was settled on, it was still 6 cents or 6.5. That is, some people would get impatient. And I reckon wasn't a bad idea to get impatient because they had it in some kind of a pool to where that the stowage over a period of 4 or 5 years, you see, just laying it in there, was going to eat up to where you'd owe the whole bill for stowage.
Can you break it down for me? What happened to your landlord? Could he continue to furnish you during this drought?
No, he couldn't. Well, he had to change his process too.
Can you tell me what
He
Mr.
put the
McComb-
squeeze,
Excuse me, sir. Can you say Mr. McComb and tell me the story?
Now, Mr. McComb, he went to day labor, and the top price for day labor was 75 cents. Now, those that farmed, well, after, I'd say the first 2 years that stayed on, now they raised the food stuff. Some had cattle, some didn't. Well, those what didn't have nothing to, hold itself up, where they had cattle, they could sell off a cow or some hogs or something, and that brought in cash money. But now, I don't know just exactly now how Mr. McComb's situation went, but you see, in this loan, that cotton was laying up there in stowage.
Sir, I'm sorry, let's cut.
While back that in the spring of 30, you got a short crop of cotton. And so I just want to understand in simple terms, did that mean that the harvest was bad and that you didn't have any money in the fall and in the winter? Can you explain that situation to me?
Well, that's the situation about gathering this. You see, you didn't have any money to gather the crop, and they went to putting it in the loan. That all happening right in the same
But I
round.
want to know about the crop itself. And you had a short crop?
Short crop. And short money on the crop. What I mean, the price slumped. Just went from 20, just fell from the fall before 20 cents down to about 7 was the highest. 6.60 and 6 cents and all like that. The buyers would come in and make that kind of offer.
On a personal level, did that mean that you couldn't feed your brothers and sisters? Can you tell me about that?
You had to feed them from a different angle. You see, just like growing the garden, they're giving the Red Cross giving these seeds. You see, it is plenty of seeds that when it come up, in about 60 days, you could go to work and use the vegetables. And such as peas, okra.
Let's cut now, because
Probably had pictures of those times back there, something.
Right. What I want to ask you about is absolutely the worst moment you had that year, 1930.
Well, one of the worst moments that I can think of was just like December coming up, and you ain't got money to pay the Santa Claus. And that's tough, especially when it's, young children involved. But what did help out, I think I've told you about this little old stave mill. That was in 1930. It went down in 31, I think, when we cut all the timber and we didn't have nowhere else to cut. And made staves out of every tree that was, usable for stave. Even cut out some shade trees in the lane and outside the road, where stock would be gathering up under. But during that time, I can't think exactly now what we was. I believe it was 2 cents.
Let's cut. So you were telling me that in the days of Hoover, it was a disaster. Can you repeat that whole line for me?
Ready?
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
ready.
In the days of Hoover, now this disaster come up.
No, wait, you should have to look at Meredith. Just look at Meredith.
Straight to her.
Right straight to
In
hold on a second, just like that pass.
I'll tell you when.
now,
Wait a minute.
We gotta wait a moment.
Hold on just a second. We're still rolling.
Tell me now.
now in the days of Hoover, we come up with this drought and this short crop, and it was a kind of a disastrous time. Now what happened? We didn't make very much crop, and what crop we made, the bottom fell out. It just went down to just where it just wasn't worth nothing. It fell from 20 cents down to 7.5 and 6 cents and like that, on down to where the cotton buyers wasn't taking chances on buying it from the landlord. See, and then that's when this loan come in, and way we got by on picking and gathering was every time we could pick a bale, we'd get a cent on the pound, and that come through the landlord, because when he get the money, he would furnish us that money back off of the cotton as he would get his loan through. Maybe I'm putting it a little better way you can understand it. And just like if you picked a bale of cotton this week, now you could use that money next week. It wouldn't be just time you gin it. You got the money. You'd have to wait until the landlord get that money. Then he'd give you that money or order for the money or whatnot. And then you use that money to gather on instead of using the seed money, what we had been used to doing. Just like the seed in the cotton was giving us enough money to every time you got a bale of cotton out, you could always use the seed money, and it was paying the ginning. But it done got so low until the ginning wasn't paid, and it's just, swap out.
But what did that mean for how you lived and how you survived?
Hold on.
Sir,
We
hold on
survived.
a second. I want you to think about who was the.
Let's cut a second. Hold on a second, sir.
Speed.
Don't forget to keep your eyes on Meredith.
Talk to me, and I want to know about your brothers and sisters and how you made sure they didn't starve.
Ready?
Yeah.
All right, now, what I would do, we would go for different jobs at different places, such as cutting puffwood. Or maybe I cut 2 days in a week. And what was complicated about cutting this wood, puffwood, that goes to the paper mill. The spotters wouldn't have timber to keep the supply of people who was cutting it. And he was stripping it off. Have a little paint, and run lines. And it's giving strips. And you and your partner would cut on that even if you was using a buck saw.
So you took this kind of job.
I took those kind of jobs. Just done short work, just wasn't, you couldn't make a week. You just, if you made a couple of days or 3, you done good, see, in that. And 30 cents a pen. Now 30 cents a pen.
Let's cut. Are you gonna? I know you were a very smart man. You really made it so that your family survived. But I'm wondering about other people. What kinds of people in your community were hardest hit by the drought, and what did you see them go through?
Well, it's a kind of a difficult question there. You take, it's kind of like, I was too busy.
Can you sit back
You
for
just
me?
sit back.
Oh, I forget.
That's all right.
Mhm.
Go on and answer it.
I was too busy, as you might say, tending to my own business to pay attention to very much of what the other fellow was doing. It's just like, it was a neighbor of mine in another community across the bar. Now, during those tough times, he got in with one of his center friends, and they killed the neighbor's cow, and he got caught up with it. Well, you see, I didn't ever have to do none of those tricks, and of course, I would say when a person gets into that kind of category, they is hard up, especially if he's a preacher or somebody that's out to be a leader. But I would always maybe catch fish or something other. May not be everything on the table the way you wanted, but I kept something other all the time. I remember I used to go what you call fish tracking. I don't know whether you ever heard that word. But that's you go out that night with a light, and you either go ahead and get on a boat and ease along at the bank, or either you can walk the bank. And those buffaloes, cats, big perches, you can see them in the water.
Speed.
Can you tell me about when you went to Hamburg? Use that.
All right, when we went for Red Cross, and the landlord wasn't saying us just go for the issue day. That's after you done got your name listed and they got a record of you. Well then, white and black would go, see. And according to the line or the way you was arranged, you went, just as it got to you. And that way, well, it was just a kind of a different situation because you got according to your family. If you had two in family, you got two persons amount that they was issuing. If you had four, you got four persons. And they're taking them pretty well as they come to them, as they lined up. But now, a lot of times, at other places, I went for aid, Red Cross they call it, and it wouldn't be nothing in this day but just the black people. Well then, when the whites would have their day, wouldn't be no black people. But now over at Hamburg, that's the county seat. I had went over there, and they just taking them as they come.
Cut.
Speed.
So how much were you paid per hundred?
It's 35 cents. I picked it
Can you say
35
I was
cents a hundred.
paid?
35 cents per 100 pounds
Can you tell me the whole sentence?
of
I was paid.
I was paid 35 cents a hundred. And if the cotton was good enough to get 200, I'd make 70 cents out of 200 or whatever pounds come over at a 35-cent rate.
And in the drought days, what happened?
In the drought days, I believe the cotton had went from $1 down to 4 bits. But following it, that's when it went to 35 cents. That is back maybe 32, 33, like that. They dropped that cotton down to 35 cents, picking. But you see, right now they was paying $1.00 for cotton beforehand. But you see, when they come down to the time of the drought, they dropped it to 4 bits a hundred. But you see, the point was, it wasn't no cotton to pick unless the landlord had a field of cotton somewhere And it didn't last very long because the whole plantation would get that after that cotton. He'd always kind of save it, let the tenants all get through picking, and then they all would hit the day crop.
We're done.